The Transformation Through Community Shared Power and Partnership panel, which will be moderated by Monica Thammarath. The panel will feature students, families, and community members who are leading as partners within the birth to 12th grade system to co-create the conditions needed for children and families to thrive in solutions that are equitable, effective, and resonate within the communities they serve. Panelists will share their own experiences and examples and insights on approaches that weave their wisdom and lived experience into co-design and co-implementation at both state and local levels. A little bit about the moderator, Monica. She currently leads and manages the Human Rights Department at the California Teachers Association, CTA. The CTA Human Rights Department works to ensure CTA members have access to resources and tools to build anti-racist local chapters and also leads CTA's community schools campaigns. So please give a warm welcome to Monica and her panelists.
All right, so who are the really amazing people here with me today? I wanted to give y'all a quick overview, and then we have some questions for them so that we could have a conversation. So the first person that I have right next to me is Ezekiel Mitchell. Ezekiel is a student and youth leader with Community Coalition. Ezekiel has led youth organizing work around SENI and BSAP, BSAP, through his involvement with Community Coalition, the Brothers, Sons, Selves, BSS Coalition, and Anti-Violence Ventures. So next to Ezekiel is Elder Kesha McGee, who's a parent organizer at the Inland Congregations United for Change. Elder Kesha brings an organizer and parent lens and can speak to stories from both the Community Schools Initiative and non-community schools examples on what this transformation work looks like and what's needed. Next to Elder Kesha is Nina Alcaraz from First 5 Monterey, who's the director of Advocacy, Policy, and Communications there. Nina she co-founded the Central Coast Early Childhood Advocacy Network to ensure that policies for the people are created by the people. And next to Nina is Valeria Garcia, who's the senior coordinator at Rapid survey project based at the Stanford Center on early childhood. Previously, she worked with recently arrived immigrants and refugees in Oakland, which my family came as refugees, so that's really important work that you did. So awesome. So let's jump into the questions. The first question is around defining community engagement and partnerships. As you know, there is a spectrum of community engagement that goes from only consulting with families, check the box activities, right? Students or community members, to deferring to them so that they are part of the decision-making process. Can you please share how you define authentic community engagement and partnership? And I wanted to actually start with Ezekiel.
Okay, so can you guys hear me? Okay, so to me, authentic community engagement and partnership is just getting the youth's input on these powerful decisions. The majority of the time, youth are not in these important spaces where these decisions are being made that will impact the youth, their community, and their schools. COCO, otherwise known as Community Coalition, which is a nonprofit organization that's led by community members that create change in South Central LA. They create a space for youth that can be seen, heard, and viewed as equals. This community partnership through COCO allows youth to be heard and engaged in these meetings.
Great, thank you, Ezekiel. Yeah. Next, I wanted to hear from Elder Kesha.
Thank you, everyone. Excuse the raspiness in my voice. I've been having a lot of issues with it for the last 3 weeks. But authentic community engagement and partnership for me is everyone having a seat at the table, proactively working with authentic shared decision-making. It's just that simple.
If only it were that simple. Next, Nina?
When I think about that, I don't know how many people are familiar with the spectrum of community engagement to ownership, but when I think about what it means to be the owner, it's really when we have true community ownership, it's really about democracy at its root, right? Where there is community participation, where communities see themselves, where they recognize themselves as the agents of change, because it really is about how those who are most affected by the issues that concern us and the issues of our community are the ones that are closest to the solutions. So when we see people being truly part of the process, then they see themselves as really the ones that are the most powerful to create change.
Great, thank you, Nina. And Valeria?
I think authentic community engagement, can you all hear me? Authentic community engagement is ultimately providing communities with self-determination. So it's not us coming in with our existing agendas and our goals and proposed solutions. It's really working with the community to uplift their existing work that they've been a part of and working at for a long time. And I think especially when you're coming at it from academic research, which often isn't thought of as a form of community engagement, it's often the opposite. I think it's important to remain agile and, there you go, I'm getting a mic. Remain agile and responsive and maintain a posture of humility. And ultimately remember that, the communities who we're held accountable to, which I think is really hard to do in our day-to-day work, we can get sidetracked by our need to report to funders and policymakers and leaders, and that's all important, but I think ultimately remembering that the community is who holds us accountable and grounds our work, and that's the vision, and who we're working alongside of is really important.
Awesome, thank you, everyone. So I'm hearing a lot of agreement around making sure folks most impacted, the folks most at the center of what the possible solutions are, should definitely be involved in that. They should be uplifted, honored, given the tools needed, right? So the next question is around examples of shared power and partnership. Now that you've shared your definition, please share what you're doing to share power with students, families, or community members. So I wanted to go to Elder Kesha first here.
Okay, well, ICUC being a part of the PICO network, we help in raising leaders in the grassroots level, local level, school level, and we have created 32 committees that do the local work. And being a part of that, one example that really led to changing our district started with me, and I don't like to take the credit, but it really started with being in the classroom. I was volunteering in my son's kindergarten class to teach the kids how to read, and then there was this one student that this 30-year educator labeled as bad. Me being a black mom, the first thing that ignited in me is, why are you calling this child bad? Because she didn't know how to read. But I couldn't take that approach, because I knew if I wanted to educate and teach the teacher, I had to do it in a different way. So I asked if I could take the student out and just me and her read and learn together. And the teacher agreed. And so I took the student out. She was an African-American student. I asked her, I said, what are some of the things you do at home for fun to learn? And she told me one of the things that she loves doing with her mom is rapping different songs, alphabets, different things. So I brought some cultural books from home for my kids' library. And in a span of 3 months, every day taking this student out, she learned how to read. And coming back to the teacher, this teacher was in amazement. She's like, I never looked at individuality in one's culture and teaching a kid how to read in my 30-plus years of education. And for me, my organizing hat popped on, the parent hat kind of came off, and I'm like, help me organize to put cultural-related books in our school. And so we went, me and this teacher went to our school site council, which I happen to be a part of as well, and we advocated for money for books, and we got 100 books put into our school, culturally related books that kids could relate to. And then the organizing hat in me went a step further, and I'm like, let's start having listening campaigns with the other 32 committees that we're on that consists of parents, community leaders, students, and see how we can get this across the board in our district. So we had 10 listening sessions with our district and with the parents and the students. And so not only did we win the victory of getting cultural-related books in our school, but we won the victory of getting cultural training to our teachers, to our admin staff, and our district staff across San Bernardino district. And it's examples like this that was prior to our community schools that really showed authentic shared decision-making. And I think our community schools framework just highlights that on a more racially just platform, and to do. So just some of the stuff that I was doing in the community.
Thank you. Awesome. Now I wanted to go ahead and kick it over to Ezekiel.
Okay, so some of my personal experiences of shared power is SEA, which stands for South Central Youth Empowered Through Action, which is a program inside of Community Coalition, and it has the same purpose, except that it's having the youth be in charge when it comes to making change in South Central LA. So it's SEA, Community Coalition, and campaign work around BSAP, which stands for Black Student Achievement Program. And that is a program that pushes Black and brown youth so they can excel academically. And then I do campaign work around LAUSD and CINE. And CINE stands for Student Equity Needs Index. And that's basically a fund that gives high-need schools the funds that they need to be on par with schools that don't need as much funding. Like, I don't want to say uppity school, but an uppity school, a school that has...
You could say uppity school. You could say uppity school.
But like a school that already has all their resources, like fresh paint, renovations, tons of extracurriculars, new materials, textbooks, Chromebooks, iPads. And I do a lot of work like that. Like I give speeches related to CINE and BSAP, like extending the funding for it so it could still be in place for the next following years for the youth to come into middle school, high school, elementary, so they can benefit off of BSAP and CINE. I do board meetings, private and public, with the LAUSD board, which could range from the superintendent to the chief of operations to everyone on the board itself. And these spaces are very important because they make sure that we're heard as a youth.
That's great, great. What a concept, right? Have parents work hand in hand with their educators and have students actually tell folks what the issues are and what the solutions they want are, right? Now I wanted to turn it over to Valeria.
Sure, yeah. So I can share a little bit about the RAPID project and how that came to be and where we're at now. So RAPID started in April of 2020, so like the very early days of the pandemic. If you can think back to that time when everything was shutting down and schools and childcare centers were closing and people were losing their jobs, and the world was just changing in ways that no one could really anticipate. And so we were seeing these families with young children being affected, and we were hearing these stories, but no one was really capturing their experiences and really capturing data on that and turning it back to leaders and policymakers and community advocates and being like, look, this is what's happening in your community and what are we gonna do about that? So that's where RAPID started, is from this need to get real-time data from families and hear, how is the pandemic affecting you? What's changed about, are you able to access food? How's a child tax credit affecting you? Like what's happening in your life? Share that with us. And then we're turning that data over and sharing it in real time. So whereas academic research is usually, like we come into a community, we collect data, and then like 2 years later, you may or may not hear from us ever again, or it might be published in some academic paper, and it's all very siloed. We were working alongside trusted community organizations and having this open feedback loop with the parents that we were hearing from. And so that's where it started from, and then it has kind of evolved as this tool to center parent voices and work with community organizations and advocates to use that data for the work that they're already uplifting and taking on. And I think one thing that I always think of that I really kind of hit me for when we were like, oh, this is a little bit different than I think what people are used to when we talk about collecting data, is we, in like the early versions of the survey, we put into open-ended response questions of like, here, what challenges are you and your family facing right now, and what's helping you and your family most right now? We didn't really think very much of it. And then we were floored by the responses that we got. People were so generous with what they were willing to share with us. People were saying, thank you so much for asking me these questions. Thank you for giving me this space to talk about my experiences. And then that's when it really, put into action and really like hit us of that, when we're collecting data and the work that we're doing isn't just about using this to advocate for communities. We're also bearing witness to the experiences of families. We're holding the stories that families are telling us, and that's a huge honor and privilege. And so I think with that, we're able to provide data that's personable and actionable to communities and policymakers and advocates, and also as a hopefully byproduct of that, also expand the notions of what academic research could look like and could be, and hopefully it's something that is led by communities and isn't something that's extractive.
Thank you. Thank you. Nina?
So I was thinking in my head about how I want to take you on this journey of our evolution, and I wanted to like flash back and do a doo-doo-doo, doo-doo-doo, doo-doo-doo. And if you know what that is, then you're about as old as I am. So, when we first started the Central Coast Early Childhood Advocacy Network, it was mainly with the purpose of thinking about how our local state legislators were not voting for early childhood issues at the way we really wanted them to. And so our kind of thinking in this was that we would go advocate with other advocates in our area to convince them otherwise and tell them stories. The first meetings that we did with our legislators were only systems leaders. And we were, or only, like people who worked within organizations or systems. And we were like, okay, well, this is our mission just to get them. We'll tell them the stories of the people who they're affecting. And then as we continued to move forward over the years, we were like, well, why are they listening from us? Like, we should bring in the actual people who are like being affected by this. And at the time, I think like a lot of people now, or maybe a lot of people in this room before, or what have you, as we're going on this journey, can say the same thing, that they thought that that was community engagement, like just bringing somebody to a meeting. And we were like proud, pat ourselves on the back, we got this. And then, as we were, working with community leaders, we were hearing more and more feedback about what it is, what's the capacity building that's needed, what is it that to really truly like work with our legislators, what roles people wanted to do, what changes they wanted to see. And we were like, oh, we're going about this in the wrong way. We are not the, just because like we get paid on a daily basis to do this work does not mean that we are the leaders. And so we took a pause, took a step back to be listeners and to really like work with parents to say, work with community residents to say, like, what is it that you need? How can we help hold the space and provide? Because we had more, I think what we brought to the table were more connections to how systems work. And that's what they were saying. Like, residents were saying that they didn't know how the systems work, and that's what they needed from us. And so we reshifted our strategy to be more focused on that, to have people who maybe initially started doing some capacity building, asking for capacity building workshops, to providing those, and now they're the ones that are designing and running the capacity building workshops. And also our planning group, who initially were the people who made up the decision-making body for us, we're mainly comprised of funders, because we are a tri-county effort, Monterey, Santa Cruz, and San Benito, and so whoever funded that was the planning group. And now we've shifted our makeup to be I think there's only 2 funders that are part of the group now, and a majority of the people are actually people who are parents and residents who have gone through our capacity building workshops and who are designing everything now, but they're resident leaders instead of systems leaders now.
Great, thank you. So Nina alluded to this, and we kind of talked about this a little bit, but sharing power and sustaining authentic partnerships with students, families, and members is not necessary in engagement, right? I think people actually used to call it outreach and then engagement, but what we're now talking about is something more, right? And the something more produces these conditions conducive to having our communities who have been on the margins or not often centered to be able to thrive. It's clear from all of y'all that y'all believe in your work and you believe in this work in the long-term vision of our society. So I wanted to invite you all to actually talk specifically about the benefits you've seen and the outcomes you've seen for children and families when organizations, government, districts, schools meaningfully partner with students, families, and community members. So for this one, I wanted to actually go to Nina first.
I like how we're mixing it up, keeping us on our toes. So the benefits, we host annual Parent Power Summits, which are also just created and run by community leaders. There's sometimes equal number of children that are there as there are participants. And when I think about, it's not just the surveys that we're measuring our success in, but it's when I see little people be like, there's my mommy, there's my daddy, and they're inspired. So it's the inspiration of not only today for the people that are, making sure that their experiences are the ones that are informing how our systems are developed and run. It's about how they're modeling it for the next generation. When I think about some of the challenges or the hang-ups that we're going through in this work, a lot of it is, it's intergenerational. There have been so many systems in place for so long, and oftentimes we think that there's going to be some sort of quick fix, or we're always searching for a quick fix, and there is that sense of urgency there, but recognizing that because it's been so generational, we need to also be patient with ourselves in terms of it may take time to fix. But that when I look to that next generation in the room also, I think that's where I really see the benefits of all of us working together.
Great, thank you, Nina. So I'm going to go back to Elder Kesha.
So the benefits that I've seen is when everyone is working together, when there's true shared power and partnership, is that basically our kids are thriving in education. We see parents that they feel that they have a belonging, and they are really proactive in their kids' education. We see community leaders realizing the power of their advocacy. We see a real sense of racial justice and equity in our education. And I think those are some of the most powerful benefits that I have seen, us lifting our voice and the community lifting our voice and really pushing back at our district.
forgot about my mic. It's been really encouraging and also challenging in a good way to just have the community leaders that we partner with push us to expand, like what we're asking about, how we're reaching communities, how, we're using data, what the impact of that can have. And it's also really amazing to approach this work through a posture of like, you are all the experts in your community. So you tell us how you want to approach decision making. What do you want to do with this data? And to like see parents and community leaders be empowered by that is like very, very encouraging, and also provides, I hope, a different model for not just in research, but generally coming into how we can partner with community leaders and families. And I think also, ultimately, that's how we have the greatest collective impact. We can't do this work in isolation. And so I think by sharing power, that's kind of the only way that we can really get to the root cause of issues and have this huge impact on whatever communities that we're working alongside of.
Okay, thank you. And to close us out on this one, Ezekiel.
The biggest benefit of sharing power is understanding each other's viewpoints and understanding why the power needs to be shared. Putting each other in each other's shoes so you guys can have a deeper understanding of why we need shared power is very important. But in my opinion, the biggest benefit of shared power is seeing the fruits of your labor. Doing all this work, spending hours doing this work, and then seeing the result. Like, my example is me doing all this work revolving around SENI, the Student Equity Needs Index Fund, and getting that budget raised. I think it went from like 1.3 million to 3 million, but that's not the exact number, but I do know that it went up a few million. And so seeing that and hearing that, it made everyone rejoice in the student boardroom, because we've been working towards this for a while, and it's just a good thing to like see that all your work has been not for nothing, but it worked. So the fruits of your labor, I would say, would be the biggest benefit.
So you heard about some examples, some benefits. Based on what folks have shared here, it hasn't gone without some challenges too, right? So what are some of the challenges you've encountered when you were trying to share power and engage in authentic partnership with students, families, and schools? What are the most critical changes that need to be made so that power is actually shared with students, families, and schools? So with this, I wanted to actually start with Valeria.
On our end, it's just, I touched on this, but building trust takes years, and building relationship is a really, it requires deep work. And it's also not something that you're entitled to. You're not entitled to people like working with you or building relationships. It's something that you really have to earn and work towards. And I think that's especially true in the position that we're in that we are an academic institution doing research, and there's been a lot of harm in that, and we're aware of that. And so naturally there's some spaces where there's weariness in the work that we're doing or how we're partnering with people or engaging with people. And so we're just aware of that. I think being aware of your positionality is really important, and being aware that it's a long, deep work that requires commitment to build trust or rebuild or restore trust with communities, and also that there's no perfect way to engage with communities, or in this case, to research. It's something that will always have its limitations, but I think it requires that transparency and continual learning and that posture of humility.
Great, thank you. Next, I wanted to go to Ezekiel.
Some of the challenges that I have encountered is there being a huge lack of spaces where youth don't feel seen as equals. Some other challenges are budget constraints, not taking accountability, and not seeing eye to eye. because the majority of the people in power most likely haven't been to your communities, your schools, so the majority of the time they don't understand your requests and demands and why you're saying these things. And so I believe the biggest challenge is being persistent with communication and being respectful, because being persistent means, you know, you're continuously doing the same thing. And of course, if you're not seeing any change, it can be frustrating. So that's where the respectfulness comes in, because sometimes emotions do come out while you're talking, and you never want to come off as rude or aggressive or like you're just fed up. Like, it's okay to be fed up, because, you know, it could always empower your speech, make it more impactful, but you never want to come off as rude and send the wrong message. And from a student's point of view, another big challenge is balancing your life with this work, maintaining your grades, being well-rested, and maybe even playing a sport. As a student youth leader, you have to learn how to balance this work and your education.
Thank you for bringing that up, Ezekiel. I don't think that that's just from a student perspective. Obviously, the balancing of life is different for a student, but I think that balance and that challenge is something that everyone here, right? We aren't just the positions or the work that we do, but we are all these other roles as well, and you can't necessarily take your hat off, you know, when you enter a room. And what I heard earlier was actually not asking folks to take that hat off is actually an asset. How do we actually start seeing the perspective of students and parents and our communities as assets and not things that they got to leave at the door, right? Next I wanted to actually go to Elder Kesha.
So some challenges that I see, especially with our district, is, you know, our district has this sense of piloting everything. And it's okay when we come in and we check a box for them, or they invite us somewhere to say, hey, I'm working with the community. But when we have people that have been working on initiatives to bring to our school district for years, and then we see them being piloted, you know, it's hurtful for us. And I see with a lot of parents and community leaders a challenge of sustainability, because, you know, the parents get tired of it and then they walk away, or community leaders just so fed up with it and they walk away. So I think it's very important to have real, you know, authentic, I keep saying it, shared decision making, where these parents and these students can come and, you know, sit at a table and say, hey, this is what I'm going through, this is what my kid going through, this is what I would like to see change. And for, you know, community members, don't take the stance of, once we start advocating and lifting our voice, that we are troublemakers, or we're coming in, you know, hey, I thought you were our friend, and now you've done X, Y, you know, and Z. And it's not about that. It's advocating for what our community wants and what our community needs and what's best for them, and not trying to meet this status quo so that you can get funding, or you can pilot this program, or you can, you know, as a district, make yourself say, I'm doing it and we're looking good and we love everybody, you know, kind of thing. So that's some of the challenges that I've seen.
Yeah, and I think sometimes piloting is like one way where folks like try to retake control of something, right? And redefine something that the community has been working on and building on for generations and decades. So
Certainly.
great. Next, Nina.
I mean, I touched on some of the challenges that I think that you know, we're fighting uphill in terms of shared power. We're not all sharing the same vision. We're not all sharing the same vocabulary. You know, when you sometimes meet with systems leaders, they might not open the door for, you know, community resident power or value that. And so, like, people are scrambling for windows. So, you know, I think that's definitely one of the challenges, is not having the same mission, vision, vocabulary. I think that there's a lot of healing that needs to happen in our communities. And so while you're healing, also trying to advocate and build the vision of a future that you want, means that it takes time, and there's speed bumps along the way. while we're doing that. And so how are we addressing all those things simultaneously, honoring individuals, honoring cultural values, and still working in a white supremacy framework and system is, I think, some of the biggest challenges that we face when we're talking about shared community power.
Great, thank you, Nina. So next, it's what's needed to share power and partner authentically. So cultivating authentic partnerships where there's shared power doesn't happen overnight. Trust takes time, right? The relationships take time. Sometimes you spend a long time building that trust, and one or two things can just rock it off and set you back, right? It takes a commitment to creating and implementing systems, structures, processes, practices, cultural shifts, and more that allow for true partnership to take place. So we want to hear from you all, right? What does it take, and what does this room, what can y'all do to do it in your everyday lives? So Ezekiel, can you get us started?
Mm-hmm. In order to share power, you have to be comfortable with being uncomfortable. You'll be in new settings, interacting and networking with new people. You'll constantly be in new spaces that you aren't familiar with. And I say being comfortable with being uncomfortable because all the time, not everything is going to be something that you're used to or something that's going to go your way. You know, obviously you're going to butt heads until you get to like a firm standpoint to where you guys can agree on something. There's going to be words that are going to be said that not everyone will like. And so you have to really become comfortable with being uncomfortable because you have to be ready for anything negative or positive that can happen. You just have to be very accepting to what will happen, but also be ready to change it if it's not what you are fighting for. To share power, you need to have bold and impactful words, but you also need to remain poised and respectful. When it comes to communicating, respect is a big factor in shared power. All starts with communication. The biggest thing, in my opinion, when it comes to sharing power is being vulnerable. Tell your story and get very personal in a respectful way so they can understand you on an emotional level.
Awesome, thank you. Elder Kesha?
I think some things that are needed is transparency, you know, trust, respect, a place of belonging. But I mean, for me, for my community, for the Black community, I just need an education to stop erasing our history, stop rewriting our history, you know. I think it's very important that you give us, I mean, without acknowledging that, without, you know, saying that that has happened, and acknowledging the fact that the education system was not set up for us, and you guys have spent all this time blocking us out, but saying that we have to fit in. And if that's not being realized, and that's not being acknowledged, and that's not being taken, and not saying, okay, well, quit talking about it. We took it, so now you take it. And take it and be respectful with it and have accountability to it, and, you know, and then work. Let us lead in telling you how we would like to see our education moving forward, you know, because we're at a disadvantage because of that, and we're at a disadvantage because we were just stripped away from who we are, you know, the power that our people have held, and we've been made to be told we fit in slavery and nothing else when we are doctors and lawyers and educators and teachers, you know. And I would like to see more people representation of myself.
Valeria?
One of the things that we say a lot, or is kind of at the ethos of our work, is reminding ourselves that our work starts and ends with community, and that we only go where we're invited. So that's kind of how we try to operate. And with that, that requires us to do a lot of listening, a lot of seeking to understand, being willing to shift priorities and adapt, and remaining agile, which is very anti how traditional academic research works. It's very prescriptive and rigid, and like, here's what we're trying to find, and here are outcomes. And so I think being willing to flip that on its head, and also deferring to the communities that hold the most knowledge and know the most about themselves. And I think it's also important not to lose sight of the bigger goal. I think, at least in research, we can get stuck on things like rigor and validity and generalizability, but I think ultimately remaining aware of the fact that, what impact are we trying to have, and how do we have that collective impact together, and who are we accountable to, I think it's really important. So.
Great. Nina?
Sometimes I think in like acronyms, or it's easier for me to think in like small bites in terms of like, what are our shared values? How are we approaching things? And so I think about Dan Siegel, if anybody's familiar with him. He has this phrase of using COAL, where you approach things with curiosity, openness, acceptance, and love. So those are things that I think are really necessary when we're thinking about shared power, from all different sides. Like that's that level of vulnerability and humility that we need to take and approach to the work. And I think that if I think about kind of what else, I feel like everything that everybody here on the panel has said, I just kind of want to +1 to. I think, despite the fact that everybody's on a different place along our journey, there are definitely ingredients to this recipe that are very common in our story, and I hope in the story of everybody in this room. So I'm also really curious in hearing from like other people in this space. So even after this presentation, to hear more about what other people are thinking has been successful for the work that they're doing in this work too.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that. So those are like our prep questions, and we still have some time. So I'm looking at folks. I wanted to throw in a question to see like how folks felt. We talked a lot about partnerships and sharing power. I'm wondering, when we look at power, we look at growing power, right? That actually sharing power means that we can actually grow power together and accomplish things that you as an individual can't accomplish by yourself, right? And so I wanted to invite anyone who wanted to speak about, have you had an experience where you went beyond partnering and sharing power to actually like feeling like you were like growing power together? Anyone?
So, I mean, for me, I wonder, is it that people have either haven't stepped into recognizing what their power is internally. Like we think of power as people being like the decision makers, but that's not always where power is, right? Your power is in your experience, your power is in your narrative, and driving our policies and systems to recognize that and accept that. And that what we can do is actually, when we're working together, is to shift that thinking of that it's only people who sit in places of quote unquote, like voting, like the legislature, to thinking about like it's really with the people who got those legislators into space as the people who have all the true power, and how do we encourage people to step and lean into that more.
Awesome.
I think growing power is like when we lean into other people's problems and take it on as ours, and being that voice and that, I think we're growing power, and that way, I think when we're looking at people, how we look at ourselves, or, look at children, how we look at our own children, and realizing the importance of, them growing and being healthy and being a part of the solution, especially the solution in education. I think we make room for power to grow, and then giving the people the ability to understand that they don't have to be higher up or have to be in a boardroom or have to be, that's not a level, it's a level of power, but you can obtain power just being that parent who sat in that classroom, or that parent who was so frustrated with what was going on, they spoke up at the school board. You could have that power, and then aligning with what other people are going through, and taking, again, their problem on as yours. I think it's a tool of growing power.
Awesome. So stepping into your power, redefining who has power, right? Valeria or Ezekiel, would you like to say anything?
No.
I feel like I'm very much still learning, but I would say just from some examples that we've seen in the past few years with Rapid and parent leaders that have really guided some of the projects, it's been really encouraging to see themselves really hone their position as the experts. And similar to some of the examples that you all provided of like using the work that we're doing together to advocate on behalf of their community. So saying like this, I'm seeing this in schools, this is my experience, and also I'm not alone, here's the data to back it up. These are what other parents are saying as well. Or there's like a huge housing issue or housing insecurity in my communities, and I'm trying to bring that forward to leaders, and I'm just an individual, or like they're not listening to me, and having this tangible data or this tangible results, and having this coalition of other parents that are experiencing that same experience has been really encouraging. So a bit more removed, but hopefully through the work that we're doing is empowering communities and advocates and parents to use that data to help shape their experiences and step forward to their community leaders.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So we all know that you practice partnerships and sharing power probably every day in your work as well. I know we're going into a break. So we hope that you all continue this conversation and come and talk with our panelists about, the work that they've been doing, how you want to learn from them, how we can learn from you all. We wanted to bring up that word cloud again, that word cloud. So awesome. So again, at the beginning, we asked y'all to bring up some words that you think of when you think of sharing power. I wanted to invite folks to shout some of them out. Anyone? Empowerment. Transformation, joy. Equity, strength. Community. Awesome. I hope we talked about all of these in our panel, and hope we can continue the conversation. So thank you so much. Please join me in thanking our panelists for the work that they do, but also what they share. Thank you. Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.